Ooh, welcome back, little creatures. You arrived just in time. The pact is sealed, the power has been claimed, and our lovers are about to become a conflagration. It is a thing of terrible beauty, watching a world turn to ash for the sake of a promise. Subscribe, my darlings, and you shall have a front row seat to the end of everything. Now, let us watch the first cities burn. Previously on Forbidden Romance, he was given a choice, death or chains of his own making. Silas chose her. Forcing the blood right himself, he sought enslavement, but instead forged a syzygy, a perfect, symbiotic loop of power, a connection so potent it annihilated their enemies in an instant. They were saved by a sacrifice, but what is the cost of a power that can unmake reality itself? He gave me his power, now we must burn the world. It comes down to this. All the running, all the blood. It ends with a choice made in a tomb at the center of the world. Somewhere deep in the stone, hounds bayed, their howls echoing as if through miles of corridor. Beneath it, a low, wet hissing crept closer, like acid eating through rock. Her hand trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of what she was about to do. Her own pulse was a frantic bird beating against her ribs, but underneath it, she could feel his, a slow, steady, mortal rhythm, a life she held in the palm of her hand. A voice came, not through her ears, but through the bond itself, a cold certainty that slid into her mind like a splinter of ice.
They're here, Evangeline.
The thought wasn't hers, but it carried all of his weight.
Whatever you're going to do it now.
Her fingers uncurl, her palm moves toward the stone. 12 hours earlier, there was no choice. There was only the ringing silence after the creation or uncreation. The bond between them wasn't a thread. It was a steel cable, freshly forged and still glowing hot, slammed directly into the base of her skull. Evangeline gasped, her lungs burning, but the breath felt wrong. It was too deep, too steady, his breath. At the same time, she felt a frantic, hammering pulse in her own chest, a wild, panicked drumming that wasn't hers. It was his heart, a 900-year-old muscle suddenly remembering how to be afraid. God!
Don't speak.
He staggered, one hand pressed to his temple. She felt the spike of his pain as if it were her own. And then something else flooded in, a sensory memory, sharp and unwanted. The scent of wood smoke and roasting meat, the slick, uneven feel of cobblestones under worn leather boots, the tang of old wine and old bud baked into the stones of a city square. Prague, 1483. The knowledge was just there, planted in her memory. The wave of sensory data was so overwhelming, she doubled over, her stomach lurching. She choked back bile, her eyes streaming. Beside her, Silas fell to one knee, his body rigid. He was feeling her terror, not observing it, not empathizing with it. He was drowning in the raw, unfiltered panic an immortal woman who had just seen a hole ripped in reality. For a being who had spent 9 centuries cultivating absolute control, the sensation was a violation more profound than any blade.
Get out of my head!
I'm trying! Like two people trapped in the same collapsing room, yelling at each other to find a different door. Adorable, really. Mordecai, the ancient scribe, finally moved. He scrambled backwards, away from them, his parchment-thin skin stretched taut over his bird-like features. His eyes, usually filled with a morbid academic curiosity, were wide with a terror that was almost religious.
What have you done?
Evangeline straightened, forcing herself to breathe. Her breath, her lungs, she focused on the physical, the heavy, reassuring weight of her crimson velvet gown, the cold of the stone floor seeping through the thin soles of her shoes. But the effort was like trying to listen to a single violin in the middle of a war. His senses kept bleeding through. The world seemed sharper, the shadows deeper. She could see the individual dust motes spiraling in the beam of light from the broken window with an unnatural clarity that was his, not hers.
We survived.
His voice was different. The deep velvet baritone still held its cynical edge, but it was thinner, lacking the inhuman resonance it had carried before. He was mortal. The thought slammed into her with the force of another memory. She saw, for a flickering second, his own shock at the warmth of the blood now pumping through his veins. Real, living blood.
Silas, are you...
I am.
He didn't need to finish. He was mortal, and she could feel the agonizing trade-off thrumming through the bond. His immortality, his power, his connection to the Shard of Umbra, all of it had been poured into the bond, a sacrifice to stabilize her, to save her. And in its place, he had taken on her fragility. He was tethered to her life. If she died, he died. They were trapped. Not just in each other's heads, in each other's fates.
Survived? You think this is about survival? You beautiful, reckless creatures. You absolute, magnificent wretches. You haven't just survived. You've bloomed.
He stared at them, his gaze flitting between Evangeline and the hole in reality, and a single terrifying tear of black ink traced a path down his cheek. Power is a physical thing in the world of the immortal. It is a web of silver threads, invisible to the mortal eye, connecting each house to its shard, each patriarch to his childer, a network of loyalty, blood, and control, a millennium in the making. And 200 miles away, in the heart of his power, Patriarch Valerian felt a thread snap. It was not a grand, explosive event. It was a subtle, perfect severance, the silver cord of energy that connected him, his house, and his will to the Shard of Umbra, a connection he had commanded for 600 years, parted as if cut by a blade of pure nothingness. For a single, silent moment, the throne room was plunged into absolute, suffocating blackness as the ambient light of the citadel, powered by the Shard, failed. Then the silver-blue light slowly returned, sputtering and weak. But the feeling of loss was a gaping wound in the Patriarch's soul. He looked down at his long, spider-like fingers. He felt diminished. A quiet, cold rage began to build in the hollow space where his connection to the Shard had been. It was a rage so profound, so ancient, it had its own gravity. The temperature in the throne room plummeted. A thin layer of frost crept across the polished basalt floor, radiating out from the throne.
Ronan.
A shadow in the corner of the room detached itself from the wall. It coalesced into the form of a tall, cruelly handsome vampire in silent, black leather armor. Lord Ronan knelt, his head bowed, his winter storm eyes fixed on the floor. He did not ask how the Patriarch knew something was wrong. He simply waited for his orders.
Our shard is unbound.
Silas.
It wasn't a question. Valerian's thin lips tightened into a bloodless line. His errant child, the finest weapon he had ever forged, now a traitor. But this was more than treason. This was heresy. And worse, it was a disgrace.
He was sent to retrieve the null. He has instead created something else. An abomination. A power signature I have not felt since the progenitor fell.
Valerian's black ice eyes stared into the middle distance, seeing the threads of power. seeing the new, impossibly bright knot of energy that had just flared into existence on the great map of the world that only he could perceive.
Erase this disgrace, kill the mortal, retrieve the shard, bring my son home for judgment.
And if he resists?
A flicker of something that might have been pain crossed the patriarch's face for a fraction of a second, so quickly it might have been a trick of the light.
Then erase him as well.
A father ordering the erasure of his finest creation. I have seen empires crumble with less conviction, little ones. 900 years of crafting the perfect weapon, and now he would unmake it rather than lose control of it. One does have to admire the commitment to pettiness. For House Arkady, power was not about control, it was about creation. And Matriarch Ravenna was its greatest artist. When the psychic shockwave of the syzygy's birth washed over the city, she didn't feel loss, she felt inspiration. It was a chord of power, unlike she had ever sensed. Not the brutal, oppressive shadow of Moros, or the dusty, passive memory of the scribes. This was something new, a perfect, harmonious loop of immortal energy and mortal vitality. It was elegant, efficient, beautiful. A faint, genuine smile touched her blood-red lips. The screaming face in her sculpture quieted, its features softening into an expression of placid adoration under her touch.
Exquisite. A perfect fusion, the purity of a null vessel, stabilized by the life debt of an established bloodline, the theory proven.
She turned away from her art, her crimson gown whispering against the white marble floor. A figure emerged from the shadows of an arched doorway. Dame Sable, her own body a canvas of Arcady modification. One side of her face a shimmering mosaic of mother of pearl, knelt gracefully.
Matriarch, the energy signature.
I felt it, my dear. A masterpiece has been unveiled. Ravenna's violet eyes, piercing and analytical, seemed to gaze at something far beyond the walls of her laboratory. She was already dissecting the syzygy in her mind, imagining its cellular structure, its biological mechanics. The mortal vessel, Evangeline, was the key. But the catalyst, the former vampire Silas, his new mortal body, a 900-year-old biological system trapped in a fragile, aging shell, he was the ultimate scientific puzzle, a living control subject.
Valerian will see this as a theft. He will send his hounds to destroy the evidence. He is a creature of order. He cannot abide a beautiful anomaly.
Your orders, matriarch.
Valerian wants to erase it. I want to understand it. Bring me the subjects unspoiled.
She turned back to her sculpture, tracing the line of a newly formed jawbone with one obsidian nail.
I want to see how they break.
I confess, darlings, Ravenna has always been my favorite monster. Valerian destroys what he cannot control. Ravenna, she wants to take it apart, admire the craftsmanship, and build something worse. The difference between a butcher and a surgeon is that the surgeon genuinely believes she is doing you a favor. Panic is a contagious thing, and Mordecai, for all his centuries of dusty scholarship, was positively riddled with it.
They'll be coming. Both houses. They felt that. Gods, the whole city felt that. Like a bell ringing in a graveyard.
Silas ignored him. His attention was entirely on Evangeline. His silver eyes narrowed. But she could feel it wasn't just his focus. It was hers, too. The bond was directing their attention, forcing them into a state of hyper-awareness of each other. She could feel his tactical mind assessing her, cataloging her trembling hands, her shallow breathing. He felt her academic mind recoiling from the violence, trying to file away the horror into neat, manageable categories and failing completely.
Can you walk?
Of course I can walk.
The lie was so bald, it was almost charming. He felt the dizziness that made the room tilt, the weakness in her knees. He took a half step toward her, his hand starting to lift. Then he stopped. Touching her would only make the feedback worse.
This is it, the silent bloom, the prophecy of the null who would wither the great houses. It wasn't about a null destroying them, it was about a null becoming one.
He grabbed the satchel, shoving burnt, priceless-looking tomes into it with his shocking lack of care. He was terrified, yes, but there was something else in his eyes, a wild, almost ecstatic glint, the look of a man who had waited his entire life for the apocalypse and was thrilled it had finally arrived.
Mordecai, what are you talking about? We need to hide.
Hide? Child, you are a walking, talking declaration of war. You radiate power at a progenitor level. Hiding is like a lighthouse trying to hide from ships. They won't just see you, they'll steer for you.
She kicked aside a pile of smoldering debris, revealing a section of stone floor covered in ancient complex sigils. He pulled a small, wicked-looking knife from his robes.
There is one place, one sanctuary hidden from the houses, protected by laws so ancient even Valerian must respect them.
Evangeline and Silas both looked at him. Hope, as it so often is, was a dangerous poison.
Where?
Mordecai didn't answer. He drew the blade across his own palm. Blood, thick and unnaturally dark, welled up. He knelt and began to trace one of the sigils on the floor with his bleeding hand, the crimson sizzling against the cold stone, glowing with a faint, sickly light.
The houses cannot see what the progenitor shields. The houses cannot hunt where the progenitor sleeps.
Mordecai, where are we going?
He looked up at her, his eyes wild with fear, and something that looked horribly like faith.
To the progenitor's vault.
The name meant nothing to her, but through the bond, she felt a jolt from Silas, a flicker of a memory, a page in a forbidden text, a warning from a long-dead tutor. The vault, not a sanctuary, a tomb, or a throne. Mordecai, the little heretic, was playing a game far above his station. This was going to be interesting. The world above was a gothic jewel box of spires and stained glass. The world below was its rotten heart. Miles of forgotten tunnels, plague pits, and collapsed sewer systems. A history written in bone and filth. The narrow passages forced them close, too close. Evangeline walked behind Silas, her shoulder sometimes brushing his back. Each accidental touch sent a jolt through the bond. She felt a shiver rack his frame, not from fear, from the cold. The deep, penetrating damp of the catacombs was seeping into his newly mortal body, a sensation he hadn't truly felt in 900 years. It was a miserable, alien feeling, and she felt the phantom chill of it in her own bones, making her teeth chatter. Without thinking, she reached out and pulled her heavy velvet cloak tighter around both of their shoulders, a small, instinctive gesture of shared warmth. He stiffened at her touch, but didn't pull away. Through the bond, she felt a flicker of surprise, then a strange, unfamiliar warmth that had nothing to do with the cloak.
Better?
I'm fine.
Another lie. She could feel the goosebumps on his skin. She could also feel his weary resignation. He, Silas, the feared enforcer of House Moros, was cold, and he needed a mortal girl's cloak to stay warm. The indignity was a bitter taste in the back of his and her throat. Above them, a faint rhythmic sound began, a deep, resonant baying. Not a dog, something larger, deeper, its call echoing through the stone and soil above.
Moros hellhounds, shadow constructs, they've picked up our scent.
The baying was joined by another sound,
A wet, tearing noise, like canvas being ripped, followed by a faint melodic humming.
Arcady, flesh crafters dissolving the sewer grates.
They were being pursued from two directions by the two most powerful predators in the city. The hunt was on. They moved faster, their footsteps splashing in the foul-smelling water that now covered the tunnel floor. They rounded a corner, scrambling up a short flight of slick stone steps that led into a darkened alleyway back on the surface, before plunging into another subterranean entrance across the way. They vanished into the darkness. The alley was empty for a moment, filled only with the sound of dripping rain and distant sirens. Then, a shadow in the deepest part of an arched doorway thickened, elongated, and detached itself from the wall. Lord Ronan stepped into the faint moonlight, his movements utterly silent. He wore the cold, patient expression of a wolf who knows its prey can't run forever. His eyes glowing with the cold, unforgiving silver of House Moros. Scanned the empty alley, he knelt, touching his fingers to the wet stone where they had just been, and a faint trail of black smoke, visible only to him, curled from the ground, pointing the way they had gone. He rose, and with a step that made no sound, melted back into the shadows. The hunt had just begun. They found a temporary respite in a place of perfect silence and reflection. A forgotten water cistern, as large as a cathedral nave, hidden deep beneath the city's foundations. Here, for a moment, there were no hounds, no hunters, only the drip, drip, drip of water echoing in the vast, dark space. They sat on the narrow walkway, their backs against the cold, curved brick wall. Mordecai was a few yards away, consulting a tattered, blood-stained map. Evangeline and Silas sat close, but not touching. The silence between them was heavy, with the noise in their heads.
You have to build a wall.
A wall? My head feels like a crowded train station. I can't even find the bricks.
She could feel his frustration, but it was banked, controlled. He was trying to teach her, to guide her through the chaos he had created.
Close your eyes. Find the center of your own thoughts. Your name, your childhood home, an anchor, something that is purely yours. And then push.
She closed her eyes. It was difficult. His awareness was a constant hum beneath her own. She focused on the memory of her father's library, the scent of old paper and lemon polish, a place of quiet safety. She pictured a wall of books rising around that memory, protecting it. For a moment, she felt a flicker of quiet. Then the world shifted. When she opened her eyes, everything was different. The cistern was washed out, the colors muted to shades of gray and black. The pillar of moonlight was a blade of pure white. Her own hands, resting on her knees, were pale and luminous in the dark. She was seeing through his eyes, the world as a vampire saw it, a place devoid of warmth, drained of color, but sharp with a predator's clarity.
Gods, is this how you see?
She felt his surprise, his jaded senses suddenly re-experiencing the world through her wonder. He felt her awe, her academic curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. It was a clean, pure emotion, a stark contrast to the terror he had been swimming in for the past hour. The invasion, for a split second, felt like a connection. It was the first time since the bond flared that they weren't fighting it. They were simply sharing it.
It's all I've seen for centuries.
The intimate moment shattered. A voice, high and sing-song, echoed through the cistern, amplified by the perfect acoustics. It was a woman's voice, but it had a strange, resonant quality, as if it were being projected from multiple sources at once. Arcady Fleshcraft.
Little subjects, come out to play. The matriarch is so very eager to begin her studies.
The voice was playful, but the words sent a spike of pure, visceral terror through Evangeline. And Silas felt it, a hot, acid wave of panic that made the new blood in his veins run cold.
There is no need for fear. We simply wish to understand you, every fascinating facet of you.
The moment of connection was gone. They were prey again. Silas was on his feet in an instant, pulling her up. His face was a mask of cold fury, but she could feel the mortal fear churning beneath it, a fear for her that was far more potent than any fear he had ever felt for himself. I have watched immortals wage wars over territory, over pride, over grudges so old the original cause has been forgotten. But I have rarely, in all my centuries, seen anything quite so terrifying as a man who has just discovered something worth dying for. And mortals, he had only been one of you for 12 hours. While the prey rested, the shepherd made a call. Mordecai had led them to the cistern for a reason. It was near one of the few remaining scribe posts, a hidden communication hub from a bygone era. He had left Evangeline and Silas at the cistern's exit, instructing them to wait. He moved with a furtive energy now, his earlier panic replaced by a grim purpose. He wasn't just a guide, he was an agent. He produced a small vial of his own black blood and painted a complex symbol on the mirror's surface. The silver shimmered, the reflection wavering like heat haze.
The text is in motion. The bloom is manifest. I seek passage through the hunting grounds.
Their reflection in the mirror cleared. But it was not Mordecai's face that looked back. It was the ancient, parchment-skinned face of Elder Casimir. His eyes were chips of obsidian, his expression unreadable, grave. He looked like a ghost in the machine, a specter of history itself.
The hounds of Moros patrol the lower ducts. Their master, Lord Ronan, walks the shadows of the old Basilica district. The artists of Arcadia have seeded the grand sewers with their biological sentinels. They are converging on your position.
Casimir provided the information with an unnerving ease, as if he were reading from a celestial map of their demise. He was not merely observing, he was directing.
A path, Elder. I need a clear path to the vault.
The old aqueducts beneath the Ivory Ward are unguarded. The houses believe them to be collapsed. They are mistaken. That path will take you to the foundations of the mountain.
My thanks, Elder.
Mordecai began to wipe the symbol from the mirror, but Casimir's voice stopped him.
See that the text is delivered to its destination, Mordecai. Do not fail.
The words were not a request. They were a command, backed by the weight of 1,000 years of prophecy. The reflection of the elder's face held for a moment longer, his dark eyes seeming to stare directly into Mordecai's soul.
History is watching.
Then the mirror went dark, reflecting only Mordecai's own terrified face. He was not just a heretic. He was a pawn in a much larger, much older game, and he was beginning to suspect that pawns did not survive the endgame. The chase was on again. Casimir's path was clear, but it was not easy. The aqueducts were a maze, and the hounds were relentless. Their howling echoed through the tunnels, a sound that bypassed the ears and settled deep in the bones. A section of the tunnel ahead had collapsed, leaving only a narrow, crumbling gap near the ceiling. Mordecai, thin and wiry, scrambled through it easily. Silas, even with his new mortality, followed, his lean frame moving with a desperate grace. Evangeline hesitated. The gap was high, the stones slick.
Evangeline, now.
The hounds howled again, closer this time. A primal fear, cold and sharp, shot through her. Silas reached back through the gap, his hand outstretched. She took it. He pulled her upward, his grip strong. As he shoved her through the narrow passage, the physical jolt combined with the spike of shared adrenaline from the chase. The bond, the unwelcome guest in her mind, flared violently. It wasn't a whisper of memory this time. It was a full-body abduction. She wasn't in the tunnel anymore. She wasn't even in her own body. She was wearing Silas like a suit of skin, looking out through his eyes. The sensory whiplash was staggering. The damp stench of the aqueduct was gone, replaced by clean, sharp scent of pine and frozen air. The claustrophobia of the tunnel was replaced by the crushing agoraphobia of an open, snow-filled courtyard under a cold, uncaring moon. Before her, before him, a vampire knelt in the snow. He was young, weeping, his fine velvet tunic stained with dirt and tears. His face was a mask of pleading terror.
Please, Silas. Brother, we were fledglings together. Don't do this. Valerian will listen to you.
Evangeline's mind screamed, "Stop! Don't!" But she had no control. She was a passenger. She felt Silas's emotional state, and the coldness of it was more terrifying than the scene itself. There was no anger, no hatred, only a quiet, grim satisfaction, a job to be done, the feeling of a whetstone being drawn across a blade. She felt his arm raise, the weight of the obsidian sword in his hand, familiar, an extension of his will. From the castle balcony above, the patriarch's voice descended like a verdict.
He sold our troop movements to Arcady for a handful of mortal cattle, Silas. The sentence is law.
She felt the muscles in his arm bunch. She felt the cold resolve settle in his gut. She felt the perfect, clean arc of the sword as it descended. She felt the sickening, wet impact as the blade plunged into the kneeling vampire's chest, right through his heart. The man's weeping cut off with a choked gasp. Shock, then betrayal flickered in his eyes. He looked up at Silas, his lips forming a silent question. Why? Blood, a shocking electric crimson against the pure white snow, sprayed across Silas's face. Evangeline felt the warm, sticky droplets land on his cheek. She smelled the coppery, sweet scent of immortal blood on the frigid air. And through it all, she felt Silas's utter lack of remorse, only the cold satisfaction of a task perfectly executed.
Well done, my son.
She snapped back into her own skin with the sickening jolt of a falling dream. The memory clung to her, a viscous film of blood and snow. She could still feel the phantom weight of the sword in her hand, the ghost of a dead man's blood on her cheek. She scrambled backward, away from Silas, her breath coming in ragged, terrified sobs.
No! No!
She looked at him, not at her protector, not at her complicated, cynical ally. She looked at him and saw the monster from the memory, the cold, efficient executioner, his father's perfect weapon. The horror wasn't just that she had seen it, it was that she had felt it, the satisfaction, the cold, clean purpose of the kill. She had been inside the mind of a murderer as he took a life, and a part of her had felt his pride in the act.
Evangeline!
Don't touch me!
The revulsion that shot through her was pure and absolute. And through the bond, Silas felt it like a physical blow. He saw himself through her eyes, not the man he was trying to be, but the monster Valerian had made him. For centuries he had taken pride in that control, in that cold efficiency. Now, seeing it reflected through her horror, it was hideous. The 900-year-old predator looked utterly, completely broken.
That was me.
He knelt a few feet from her, not daring to get closer. The bond was a two-way street of torment. He was drowning in her revulsion, and she was trapped with the echoes of his violence.
But it is not who I am now.
He felt her terror, the way her heart was hammering, the ice in her veins, and his new, unfamiliar mortal body reacted to it. His hand, the same hand that had held the obsidian sword, began to tremble. Just a faint tremor at first, then an uncontrollable shaking. He clenched it into a fist, but he couldn't make it stop. He, who had never known a moment of involuntary weakness in his entire existence, could not control the shaking of his own hand. This vulnerability, this complete loss of his legendary control, was more profound, more naked than any memory of violence. 900 years. 900 years of iron control, of calculated violence, of a body that obeyed without question. And now a trembling hand undoes him. I have seen ancient kings brought low by armies, darlings. I have never seen one brought low by his own heartbeat. It is, I confess, the most human thing he has ever done. Silence fell, a thick, wounded silence. Mordecai stood awkwardly in the entrance, a silent sentinel to their shared collapse, understanding nothing and everything at once. Evangeline stared at Silas's hand. That hand. She kept seeing it superimposed over the present moment. One moment, gripping a bloody sword in a snow-filled courtyard. The next, shaking uncontrollably in the green, sickly light of a forgotten cave. The monster and the man, the executioner and the exile. They weren't two different people. They were both trapped in the same skin, and she was trapped with them. She saw the cost of his choice, the centuries of blood and duty that had forged the monster, and the single, desperate act of love that had unmade him, leaving this terrified mortal in its place. Her fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. The revulsion was still a bitter taste on her tongue, but something else was rising underneath it. A fierce, defiant wave of something. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acceptance. She was a scholar. She understood that history is never clean. People are not clean. They are messy, contradictory things, beautiful and monstrous at all once. And she was tired of being afraid. In a move that shocked him, shocked Mordecai, and most of all, shocked herself, she pushed off the wall. She crossed the small space between them and knelt in front of him. He flinched, expecting a blow, a condemnation. Instead, she gently took his trembling hand in both of hers. His skin was cold, but where her fingers wrapped around his, a faint warmth began to build. She looked from his wide, silver eyes, filled with a despair so deep it was an abyss, down to their joined hands. Then she did something unforgivable, something that drew a new line in the sand of her own fading morality. She raised his hand, the hand that had murdered, the hand that had saved her, to her lips, and she pressed a firm, deliberate kiss to his blood-stained knuckles.
I know.
It was only 2 words, but in the silent language of the bond, it was a vow. I see the monster. I see the man. I see the blood on your hands and the terror in your heart, and I choose you. I choose all of it. The bond between them, which had been a conduit for pain and fear, suddenly flared, not with violence, not with terror, but with a clean, searing warmth, a current of pure, undiluted relief from him, a wave of defiant loyalty from her. For a moment, it pushed back the cavern's chill, a tiny star of warmth in the suffocating dark. He stared at her, and for the first time in 500 years, the executioner looked like he might weep. It was, of course, too good to last. Peace is a luxury the hunted cannot afford. The moment was shattered by the sound of scraping stone from the tunnel entrance. Mordecai spun around, his face pale as death. The look of frantic religious terror was back in his eyes, 10 times worse than before.
They know.
Evangeline and Silas reluctantly broke their gaze, pulling their hands apart. The cold of the cavern rushed back in.
Know what?
This path, Casimir's path, it wasn't safe. It was a funnel. Both hunters, Ronan and the Arcady bitch, they're converging on the entrance to this section. They've cut off our retreat.
He pointed a long, trembling, ink-stained finger down the only other passage leading out of the cavern. A long, dark tunnel carved from the bedrock, sloping down into absolute blackness. It looked like the throat of some ancient, sleeping beast.
The vault is just ahead, down that tunnel. It's the only way out now. We have to move, now.
The renewed urgency was a mercy in a way. It forced them to put aside the emotional fallout, the horrifying memory, the unforgivable kiss. There was no time for processing, no time for doubt. There was only the hunt and the dark path ahead. They ran. Silas took the lead, his knowledge of tactics and pursuit kicking in despite his fear. Evangeline followed close behind, her hand hovering near his back, not touching, but ready. They were no longer two individuals fighting a shared invasion. They were a single, desperate entity, their minds and movements beginning to sync in a way that was both terrifying and brutally efficient.
They emerged from the tunnel into a space that felt like the inside of a god's heart, a place of perfect, terrible silence. The progenitor's vault. It was not a work of masonry or engineering. It felt grown, as if the mountain had given birth to it. They stopped at the edge of the cavern, dwarfed by the scale of the place. Even Mordecai was silent, his earlier panic subdued by the sheer presence of the vault. The faint silver light from the glyphs cast their faces in a stark, ethereal glow.
What is this place?
The beginning and the end. The heart of the progenitor's power, shielded from the petty squabbles of the houses that came after.
As Evangeline and Silas stepped forward, the light from the glyphs brightened, shifting from silver to a shimmering mixture of black and white. The humming in the air grew louder, resonating with the bond between them.
It has been sealed for a millennium. The legends say it can only be opened by a power that echoes the progenitor's own, a perfect union of the divine and the mortal, a syzygy.
It's a lock, and we are the key.
Evangeline looked at the massive stone disc, sanctuary. It felt less like a safe harbor and more like the door to a cage or a throne room. The distinction, she was beginning to realize, was critically important. The hounds had arrived at the gate. The time for awe was over. A massive explosion rocked the cavern, muffled by stone, followed by the wet, tearing sound of dissolving rock. Their voices, distorted and monstrous, echoed through the stone, amplified by the cavern's acoustics.
The traitor and his whore. Cornered at last. The patriarch will be pleased.
Oh, don't be so grim, Ronan. This is the exciting part. The dissection begins.
The sounds of destruction grew louder, closer. The rock at the tunnel entrance began to crack and crumble. They had minutes, maybe less.
Open it.
Evangeline took a deep breath, the cold air stinging her lungs. She started to raise her hand towards the door, but Mordecai, with a strangled cry, threw himself in front of it, his arms spread wide as if to protect the stone. His face was a mess, streaked with tears of ink-black blood from the strain of his earlier wards. The morbidly curious academic was gone, replaced by a terrified, weeping fanatic.
You don't understand. Stop.
Mordecai, get out of the way! It's our only chance!
It's not a chance. It's a trap. It's not a sanctuary.
The words hung in the shaking air, more powerful than any explosion from the tunnel. Silas froze, his hand on the hilt of a knife he'd taken from a scribe's post. Evangeline lowered her hand.
It's a declaration, an ancient rite of ascension. The moment you open that door, the power of the syzygy, your power, will flare like a new star in the firmament. Every house, every bloodline, every vampire from here to the frozen wastes will feel it. They will know. You won't be hiding from them.
He looked up at them, his eyes begging for understanding that he knew would damn him.
You'll be announcing the birth of a new great house, House Syzygy.
Oh, Mordecai, you brilliant, treacherous, weeping little creature. I knew I liked you for a reason, darlings. He didn't lead them to safety. He led them to a throne. And now, the only door out is the one that declares war on every immortal who has ever lived. How deliciously, perfectly cruel. There it was, the final, perfect, beautiful betrayal. The whole desperate flight, the talk of sanctuary, the secret paths, all of it had been a lie, a manipulation, a forced march to this exact moment.
A new great house?
They won't just hunt you anymore. The ancient laws will force their hand. They will have to choose, bend the knee to a new power, or wage a war of total annihilation against it. There is no neutrality when a new god is born.
The retention thread pays off. The true purpose of the vault. It was never a hiding place. It was a stage.
Tasmir.
He believes the houses are corrupt, decadent, that they have squandered the progenitor's gift for a millennium. He saw the prophecy of the silent bloom, of you, as a chance to reset the world, to burn it all down so something new could grow.
The choice was finally laid bare, stark and hideous in the pulsing light of the vault. They could stand here and be torn apart piece by the hunters who were seconds away from breaking through. A brutal, meaningless end in the dark. Or they could open the door. They could survive the next 5 minutes by declaring war on the entire world. Their sanctuary was a throne, and sitting on it was a death sentence. The old scribe wasn't wrong. He wanted to burn the old world down. He had simply found the perfect match and the perfect kindling. How delightfully efficient. The end of the line.
Silas, you have disgraced our house. The mortal dies. You will come home.
Now, Ronan. The matriarch was very clear, unspoiled. I require them both, functional.
Silas didn't answer. He simply moved, positioning his mortal body between them and Evangeline. A 900-year-old legend now reduced to flesh and blood, shielding a power that could unmake reality. A beautiful, pointless, human gesture. But Evangeline put a hand on his chest, stopping him. He looked back at her, his silver eyes asking a question for which there were no words. She met his gaze, and in the silent, instantaneous language of the bond, a conversation passed between them. He saw her terror, he saw her despair, and then he saw them both burn away, replaced by something else, something cold and hard and terrifying. He saw her decision. His face, for a moment, registered shock, then a slow, grim understanding. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He had made his choice when he forced the bond, chaining his fate to hers. Now, she was making hers. She stepped past him. She turned her back on the hunters, on the threat of immediate, violent death. She faced the colossal, 50-foot door. Her expression was no longer that of a terrified scholar. The fear was gone, the softness was gone. Her face was a mask of terrible, world-breaking resolve. She raised her hand, the same hand that had trembled just 12 hours ago. It was steady now, as steady as the ancient stone before her. She placed her palm flat against the cold, humming surface of the progenitor's vault.
A single, pure, bell-like chime rang through the stone, shaking the very foundations of the world. The glyphs beneath her hand erupted. A blinding, silent torrent of black and silver light flooded the cavern, throwing everything into stark, impossible relief. Ronan and Sable cried out, shielding their eyes. The light was not warm. It was cold, absolute, the light of a dead star being reborn. A sound began, not a sound for the ears, but a vibration in the bones. A low, grinding groan, like a continent cracking in two, like a world-sized tomb being forced open after 1,000 years of silence. Evangeline's eyes were wide open, reflecting the blazing, swirling glyphs. All the fear had been burned out of them. In its place was the terrifying, cold resolve of a queen who had just taken her throne and declared war on heaven and hell. The grinding sound rose to a deafening crescendo, and then silence. There we are. The little scholar finds her crown, and it is forged from the world's ruin. How perfectly fitting. Poor Mordecai thought he was lighting a candle in the dark, but he has simply set the entire forest ablaze. I do so adore it when mortals, faced with oblivion, choose to become oblivion itself. Evangeline has answered the call, and now the old blood must answer her. These magnificent tragedies are created only for my library, for Crimson Tales. Subscribe. You will want a very good seat for the coming war.